Hi everybody, my name is Jainaba. I am the Workforce Equality, Diversity and Inclusion Officer for the ICB, and today I am joined by Danielle, and in celebration of Black History Month, really privileged and honoured to have you sit here with us today to share and hopefully understand your journey as a Black woman, but also most importantly, one of the major contributors of the NHS.
Wow, that's a lot to live up to. Thanks, Jennifer. It's really, really good to be here. And obviously, as Black leaders, I always think it's important that obviously the main thing is that we're doing our job and we're doing it really well, and we're role modelling inclusive leadership and aspiration. So, yeah, good to be here.
Inclusive leadership and aspiration. I'm sure we will touch on that. But yeah, key important things within the NHS. So this is Black History Month, and some of us might already know Black History Month is a way of acknowledging and celebrating the contributions of people from African Caribbean heritage, just to ensure it is celebrated, but also retell our stories. But one of the reasons we've decided to sit with you today is just to see what your journey has been like, and how you can inspire as well, and what as an NHS we can do to make the NHS a more welcoming and inclusive place for everybody. So my first question for you is, can you share some of the pivotal moments in your journey to leadership? Have you faced any challenges as the leader within the NHS?
I think any leader is going to face challenges, so for sure. But in terms of pivotal moments along my career, I think probably one of the first ones that's worth highlighting is my decision to get involved in NHS board work, which I was working in employment and skills. So really trying to design strategies to make employment opportunities more accessible to people who are a long way from the labour market. And it became clear to me that you could only go so far with that if you didn't really understand people's health and housing needs. So I decided to get onto health and housing boards to inform my employment and skills work. And then as I ended up joining an NHS board as a chair rather than just as a board member. And so it took up a lot of my time. I ended up stepping away from my employment skills work and focusing on the board work. So that's how it happened. So that's probably the most pivotal moment, because it was a step change in the direction of my career.
Now, looking back, are there any other challenges that you faced within that space? Any learnings or takes from that?
I think particular challenges that I faced as a Black female leader has been really wanting to promote inclusion and anti-racism, but the risk of being seen as a one-trick pony, if you like. So I literally had it said to me in a board that I was chairing, well, can see why you'd think that's important, but in the scheme of things, it's hardly a priority. I'm like, whoa. So it doesn't matter how senior you become, when you're talking about anti-racism, that is a challenge, and people do feel uncomfortable.
Absolutely. And in those moments, and during that discomfort, what made you persevere? What made you think, I need to carry on with this?
Well, it's the reason for doing the role is to tackle the improvements that we need to make. And that means making sure that our services are responding to the need. And we know that because of the health inequalities that exist in the population, and the health care inequalities, i.e. the difference of experience when people are being treated, means that, you know, we do have problems that we need to address. And then when you look at the workforce and the disparities and inequalities in representation at different levels and the difference experience, you've only got to look at staff surveys and the res data. You know, you can't just ignore it. I don't think you can anyway. I think it's
very revealing.
Yeah.
You can't.
Yeah. So I think that you have to come at it at different angles and bring people along on the journey with you. You can't just sort of shout at people and expect them to agree, because people are at different points in their journey of understanding on these issues.
We've talked about challenges briefly, but are there any modules or any means you've used to navigate challenges as a leader, but you know, particularly as a Black woman within the space where representation and visibility is very limited?
So periodically, I have been very visible and active in this space, and I try to sort of balance it out. So you'll see me for a few years, very high profile, speaking, you know, on television or on national conferences and things. But every time you do that, it takes a really emotional toll. It's real emotional work. You're always expected to share, you know, traumatic experiences about your journey. People don't really appreciate what it takes out of you. So I always sort of try and balance it. So I will do that, but I am, you know, I'm an all-rounded chair. My role is to lead the organisation as a whole, and not simply to be pigeonholed. And so I take that sort of balance. So I will also work very closely with colleagues, executive and non-executive colleagues, to support people to develop their ideas around these issues, to support the development of strategies, and to build accountability into our processes and systems. So there's a whole different aspect to the role, beyond simply being there as the figurehead, shouting about it and speaking out, although obviously that is important too.
So with your level of exposure and experience in sitting at these boards, can you tell us in your own simplest terms to colleagues that work within the healthcare system and lead as an organisation why you think representation matters?
Well, you see, I have a slightly nuanced response to that, because I don't think representation in of itself is what matters. I think the visibility of a diverse leadership sends an important message to people who think those jobs are not for the likes of us, and get put off from applying. So I think that's important. But you know, you could be a Black female leader that does nothing to support people coming up behind you, pulls up the step ladder behind you, and simply because you're there, you know, as a representative, isn't good enough. So yeah, I think I've sort of balanced idea about what matters in terms of representation, but I do think the evidence is really clear that you want to avoid groupthink, you want to have different perspectives, people from a range of different backgrounds looking at issues and challenges. And so it's important from that point of view.
Thank you. So you're known for your passion about inclusive leadership, and I know this because you're very proactive, always sharing information of what you think would be helpful in the work of EDI for the ICB. So what drives your commitment to this work? So what changes do you hope to see within the NHS?
Well, what really drives my commitment to this work is I really don't like unfairness. You know, when you look at, you know, people who've been in the NHS, you know, on a band 5 for 30 years and never been supported to progress, really don't think it's for them. And then, you know, you ask, oh, well, what qualifications you've got? Oh, PhD, did it in my spare time, funded it myself. That is such a common story across the NHS. We're squandering talent at a time, you know, when the NHS has significant workforce sustainability challenges. So it doesn't make sense from a business point of view, and it's immoral. And then when you look at the health inequalities, that is unfair, on people who are experiencing ill health, suboptimal experience in their healthcare. But it also is a cost. It doesn't make good business sense. When you've got people accessing the most expensive forms of healthcare because they weren't supported to take preventative measures earlier on. So those are the things that really drive me. It just really makes sense.
As we celebrate Black History Month, how do you reflect on the progress made for Black professionals in the healthcare, and what steps do you think are necessary for us to ensure that future progress?
Well, we definitely are seeing some progress. I don't like to be all doom and gloom, because we definitely are seeing, in some aspects, in some professions and some occupations, we're seeing more visibility. I mean, there was a report out, I think it was yesterday, that said NHS communications is terribly underrepresented in terms of diversity. So there's clearly areas where that is just not happening. And so we need to really focus on having that breadth of background and experience and opportunity across all of the occupations at all levels. So I'm pleased by the areas where we can see progress, but I really want us to do more. And I think when you see people bring in their different narratives, that can only strengthen what we're trying to achieve as well. What I would like to see, I'd like us to get to the point where we don't need a Black History Month, where actually our stories are, integral to the stories and the narratives that are woven as a whole, that we don't have to say, remember the people that came over from Windrush were really important in building up the NHS. Remember all of the nurses from Ireland contributed. We don't need to add that on because it's woven into the stories that we tell ourselves. I think that's when we know that we've really achieved.
As an EDI lead within my organisation, we'll be hoping that we don't need to have to constantly tell our stories and remind people how people should be treated. So finally, final question, what advice would you give to other Black women, including myself, who aspire to leadership roles in the NHS?
So I think what's really important is, first of all, to aspire and to apply and to really go for it, and not allow the fact that in your field you're not seeing role models that look like you. Mm-hmm. Don't allow that to put you off. I think it's really important to have some allies, and obviously allies from your own community of interest is really important, but having white allies that certainly helped me. Mm-hmm. When I look back on my career and think, I did get a bit stuck in some places, but I found I had one female line manager who saw potential in me, and really she was the one that pushed me on. She gave me the space actually to get out and do these board roles, which ended up being the direction that my career has taken. So I think identifying people that can support, I think avoiding the sort of tokenistic initiatives that are quite often trotted out as a way of looking as though we're doing something. So we've really got to think about the opportunities that you're stepping into. Is this a good use of my time? Why am I being photographed all the time and put to the front of the group when it's being publicised? What am I actually going to get out of it? And really make sure that you're pursuing something that you really want to do, not just for the leadership opportunity, because you're much more likely to shine if you feel strongly or passionately about it, I think. And then I think, unfortunately, you do also need to be mindful of the fact that we are as you step forward into leadership, you will be in positions where, situations where it is less inclusive, and you may feel uncomfortable. I know at one stage in my career, I would regularly go to a meeting where I was the only woman and the only black person. I'd watched one rugby game and I just talked about that all the time. So sometimes you do need to understand a little bit about, the cultural signifiers and be able to join in as well. But I think staying focused on where you want to get to and engaging with people who can support you to achieve that is really important.
Well, that's all from me, Danielle. Do you have any reflections, any question, anything that you'd like to share?
No, it's been really good to have the opportunity to talk. It is something that I feel passionately about. I'm very pleased that Coventry and Warwickshire as a system have really committed to becoming an anti-racist system and are accepting that there's work involved to get there, but I'm sure that we will.
Thank you. Thank you everyone for taking the chance to hopefully watch this, and I know there's a lot I am taking from this as an aspiring black woman in the NHS, and I do know that young men and women, black or white, there's a thing to learn, and for allies as well. So once again, thank you very much for taking the time to be here, Danielle.
You're welcome.
Thank you.